Hi everybody. We have a super fun project that we're going to work on this week, and this video is intended to help you identify the materials and tools and the setup that you'll need before you get started. It's very important that you don't skip the videos, that you watch all of them all the way through and don't skim through them thinking, I got the general idea, and just go off on your own. There is a lot of sort of technical information that will be in those videos, and it will be important to watch it for two reasons. One, so that you have a better chance at being successful with your casting, and the other is because if you don't follow the instructions, especially in regards to cleanup, you could end up damaging the pipes in your house. So you will want to really sort of pay attention to the cleanup instructions. The materials that you will need to get started are, there were some bamboo skewers in your kit. You may or may not need these depending on the position that you put your hands in. So I would just have these handy as a just in case. You'll also want some various clay tools. They'd probably be useful, although you also could just get away with using a utility knife or an X-Acto knife to kind of cut most of it out. But I do find in my clay toolkit that the large loop tool, the smaller loop tool, and my needle tool also work great for cleaning up the alginate off of the casting when I'm trying to remove it. A sponge from your clay toolkit, useful. The green scrubby was put in your toolkits, so this would be useful. If you don't have either one of those, I just found this old kitchen scrubby that's now my studio that's soft on one side and scratchy on the other, so that could do something similar. You'll want two containers. One, I often prefer and suggest, oh, you can't see it, but a 2-liter soda bottle that's empty and that's been cut off, because you get the most out of the alginate. You get your alginate as full as you can and sort of get the most out of that alginate. If you use too big of a bucket for a small hand, then you have a lot of waste around the edges. If you don't have a 2-liter soda bottle empty, you could also use like a empty milk container. This is very similar in volume, minus the corners, so that would work. But regardless of what you have, you do need two containers. One will be for the alginate that you're going to cast your hand in, and then the other one will be to pour in your excess plaster. So we're going to make the mold with the alginate, take our hands out, pour plaster in there, and the extra plaster is going to go in here, or it could even just stay in your bucket and you'd end up with a shallow disc of whatever your leftover plaster is or whatever the shape of your bucket is. But we'll be saving that plaster and using it for a reductive carving project. So we'll only have to mix one batch of plaster and we'll get sort of two projects out of it. So two containers of some size, or at least something for your hand, and then your bucket. And speaking of buckets, you will want two buckets. They don't both have to be this large 5-quart size. I just happen to have two buckets that are that size. We're going to need one for mixing the alginate and the water, and then I have another bucket that I'll use, that I'll just put a little bit of water in as my cleanup bucket for rinsing tools and wiping away plaster and various cleanup things. And so again, I don't need a lot of water in here, because I'm going to let the plaster or whatever I was cleaning up settle to the bottom, and then pour the clear water off the top and kind of scrape out and toss whatever settled to the bottom, because we don't want plaster, and also we don't want alginate to go down our sink drains. So one bucket for mixing, and one, it even could just be the size of a larger yogurt container for cleanup. I pulled out newspaper out of this bucket because I like to have newspaper for two places. One, I've actually pre-cut this into smaller little squares. I like to use newspaper for cleanup when I'm working with these projects. But you also could use paper towels if you didn't have newspaper, although we did put some in the kit. So this is good for cleaning out buckets and also kind of quick cleanup of your hands. Did I say paper towels would also work? They also would work. I've also gone ahead and put a layer of plastic on my work surface, and then I've also put newspaper on top of that plastic. I like to reuse the plastic as much as I can, and by putting newspaper over it, that makes for quicker cleanup, so that I can reuse all of those parts. You have 2 sheets of plastic, so you might even want to put a second piece of plastic underneath your work area where you are working. I recommend not doing this on carpet or on a rug. And if you do have to, like, give yourself a really wide area. But if you can go and work on the floor in your kitchen, if you have linoleum, I've even had students that said they did these projects in their bathrooms and, you know, were like, oh, I didn't realize the bathroom could be a studio. So just kind of think about where you're locating yourself. The plastic should help contain the mess. You could put something on the floor as a sort of just in case. And if we're careful, we shouldn't make too much of a mess. Okay. So we are casting hands out of alginate. These are some examples here. In some other videos, I'll kind of talk more about that process of casting. But the final 2 pieces to talk about for this video that you'll need for making it are your alginate. So it should have come in your paper bag, and it should just have Sharpie Alginate 1 pound written on it. And the other material that you'll need is your plaster. And this came in a baggie with a paper label. This is 1 pound and this is 2 pounds. So the lesser is alginate. And also, again, clearly read the label. I'm being very specific about making sure that you differentiate between the plaster and the alginate, because if you accidentally mix the plaster and you stick your hand in it, the plaster is going to harden around your hand and you're not going to be able to wiggle it out without breaking it apart with like a rubber mallet or something. Like, you would get your hand out, but it would be unpleasant. So pay attention. The alginate, when it cures or when it sort of sets, actually is kind of like Jello. So it's soft and it's kind of squishy, and you'll be able to pull your hand out of that. So make sure you're listening, you're watching the videos, and you're paying attention and really just keying into using the alginate. The sort of final thing to talk about is health and safety in terms of the materials that we're working with. So this alginate is a silica-free alginate, which means it doesn't contain silica, which is a fine dust that can be airborne, that you can't see, it's so fine. And it's a health hazard, especially for prolonged usage in ceramic studios and also in prosthetics and casting. So be aware of those kinds of things, and always read instructions and directions. And if they, highlight silica or tell you to wear a respirator, wear a respirator. Again, though, this one is silica free, and so the dust for it is quite minimal. Alginate in itself is a seaweed-based material, and it's what dentists will use to make castings of your mouth. So most of it is also food grade. So it's a fairly safe material to use as long as you're keeping the dust levels low and then paying attention to silica or not silica. The plaster also is a non-carcinogenic material, meaning it doesn't have anything in it that is like scary or harmful to breathe in. It doesn't have silica, and it's a gypsum-based material. The sort of most important thing to consider with this is dust, and if you are sensitive to dust or are near someone who is, you'd want to have respirators or try to, not have a party with your plaster as you're working to kind of keep the plaster down. And then these 2 materials also should not go down your sink drain, so that's why I said I have a cleanup bucket. Okay. Gather all of these materials and then get ready for the next video. The next video will cover hand positions for how to position your hand while you cast it. Okay, I'll see you in a minute.